Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Talk of the Class podcast. I'm Bryce Brown, your host and guide on this education journey as we set out to discuss the challenges and issues facing K-12 public school teachers across the country. For more information about my background or what you can expect from the podcast, don't forget to go back and check out episode 1 and get caught up on all of the episodes up to this point. I would really appreciate the support. Today, we're going to be touching on a topic that has been in the news quite a bit lately. Of course, I'm talking about the modifications and waivers in relation to teaching certification standards across the country. We're going to take a look at the different states that have implemented some changes over the last year or so and some potential fallout from these changes, as well as how this might impact public education moving forward. A few weeks ago, we talked about the teacher exodus and the resulting shortage of teachers. And it seems like these changes that are being made by states are a direct kind of response to those shortfall issues. Before we do get started, I want to remind everyone to make sure you follow the podcast at Talk of the Class podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Also, check us out on YouTube, where you will see the videos of each of the podcast episodes posted. I appreciate all the following on all of those social media platforms. It's really been kind of a pleasant surprise to see the numbers grow and watch them kind of increase week over week. So again, very happy for the support. Keep those numbers rolling in. Keep sharing with your friends. If you feel like your teacher friends could get something out of this, or if I, can get something from you, I really do feel like it's a community. We need feedback. We need that back and forth and that open line of communication between teachers so that we can bring to the forefront the issues that are most important. Also, make sure to join the Patreon community for $5 a month if you want to support the podcast. For that $5, you will get a monthly newsletter. You get some bonus content, and then you'll also get the opportunity to share your own side hustle links to your Etsy accounts, your teacher pay teachers, things like that. So you're helping me out. I'd love to help send some business back in your direction as well. Because as I've mentioned before, as teachers, we know we all have some sort of side hustle. I got to do what you got to do to get by. So I want to help out on that in any way I can. Once again, thank you for the support, and I hope you enjoy the show. So I mentioned in the intro that there have been a lot of changes to state certifications, some of them temporary, and some of them to be determined, I guess. There have been some minor changes and adjustments that I am relatively on board with that I think will put good teachers in classrooms who may have just missed the mark by a bit when it came to a certification test. And then there's some pretty overwhelming changes in some states that we will see how they turn out. Obviously, I'm not in a position to tell any state what they should or should not do when it comes to their teaching credentials. But there are some things that give me a little pause and some cause for concern. So maybe the one that has been kind of at the forefront of teacher news recently has been the change made in Florida, allowing veterans to teach without certification or even a bachelor's degree. And we've seen other states, Arizona, I can point to specifically, that has offered an opportunity for teachers to gain temporary credentials while they're working on their bachelor's degree. So there is some precedent for this, and it's a hard topic to kind of approach, because it's not that I don't believe that veterans are capable of being great teachers. I think veterans, like anyone else, there are people that are probably born to teach in that group. I have no doubt about that. Where my issue lies on this is that I can't think of anything inherently related to teaching when it comes to being a member of the armed services. Like, it's one does not directly correlate to the other. You have some serious life experience that comes with being a veteran. You have certainly earned the right to have the respect of those around you. And there are other programs in play that reward. I don't even want to say reward, because I'm still not sure it's enough of a trade-off for what veterans are having to go through. But there is incentive for veterans in several states in terms of financial assistance for college that is related to their service. For example, in Texas, I know that there are specific programs in place that will pay at least a portion of tuition and fees for veterans to go back to school. So I have no issue with people coming out of the military and having an opportunity to have school paid for in an effort to become a teacher. Because as I said before, I do think that there are a lot of people, coming out of the military from here and well into the future that will come out with life experience that I think would be very valuable for our students. But that doesn't translate necessarily to knowing how to be a teacher. And I think that just because they've served, kind of handing them a temporary credential and saying, like, hey, we trust you, go do this job. I don't really understand the logic there. And it does concern me about what it says about the ability of certified trained teachers. Because in my opinion, if you're saying that time served in the military automatically qualifies you to teach fourth grade math, then you're saying that anyone with life experience can be a teacher. And I will go to my grave saying that that's just not the case. Teaching is not something that you can just put a warm body in a room and they will be successful. It doesn't work that way. I know incredibly intelligent people who are great leaders in their field that do not have what it takes to be a classroom teacher because it's not in their skill set. I'm not saying that they are not great workers. I'm not saying that they're not incredibly skillful. That particular skill eludes them. Now, in 2018, Florida had already passed legislation that allowed veterans to teach as long as they held a bachelor's degree. So it effectively gave, a credential waiver to military veterans who had a bachelor's degree to teach under sixth grade. So anything, K through 5, they were able to teach. And if they taught 6th through 12th grade STEM, so science, technology, engineering, math subjects, then they were required to hold a master's degree or above in STEM. So in one of those areas, they were required to hold a master's degree or above. So the waiver existed, but the education component was still there. They didn't necessarily have to have gone through a certification program or have a teaching degree, but there was still a component of education. What has changed under this new law is that now there is no degree component necessary on the front end. Now, I think there's been a lot of oversimplifying and kind of clickbait that's gone on, just like veterans allowed to teach with no degree. It's not a forever type of thing. There are parameters that are put on it. First off, it's not open to anyone who served. They have to have completed 48 months of military service with an honorable or medical discharge. So already they had to have shown a 4-year commitment to service, which kind of serves in lieu of someone who went to college for 4 years. So that component is in many ways, in my opinion, similar to the 2018 rule, which is you showed a level of commitment to something that you were doing. They do have to have at least 60 hours of college credit. So they're not starting from scratch. These are people who are effectively halfway through a bachelor's degree. And they have to have at least a 2.5 grade point average out of 4. Now, I know there are people that will look and say a 2.5, that's not high enough. I can also tell you that there are teachers right now who are certified teachers who are wonderful teachers that probably would not share their undergraduate GPA with you. Okay. 18 to 22 years old, not the best decisions you ever made in your life. GPA may not have been as high as you would like it to. So I don't have any issue with the 2.5 GPA. The 60 college credit hours, this is something that kind of falls in line with the highly qualified model of showing a certain number of college credit hours. You're putting people with some level of education into the role. They do have to have a passing score on a Florida subject area exam for bachelor level subjects. And they have to have secured a job in a Florida school district, including charter schools. So those are the components of the new law. Now, I had mentioned previously that this is not like a system without an expiration date, right? So veterans are able to get a 5-year temporary teaching certificate under this law. Okay, they will be assigned a classroom mentor for a minimum of 2 years, and they have to earn a bachelor's degree during that 5-year period. Okay, so this is kind of almost serving as like a grow your own type model. It's getting them in the door, providing them with mentorship, and then telling them you have X amount of time to complete this degree for you to gain kind of permanent certification. Not permanent because we have to get them renewed, but non-probationary or non-temporary certification. They also are not allowed to teach subjects that require a master's degree. So even if they get credentialed during that 5-year time, it will not qualify them to teach subjects that are otherwise requiring a master's degree. They would still have to go on and get a master's degree in order to be able to teach those subjects. So that's why I say I'm kind of on the fence on this. I am not opposed to putting good people in positions to be successful and help our students. I do worry a bit about the lack of education training, of just kind of sticking them in the classroom, not having gone through any sort of certification program or education degree program, because I do think there are a lot of components with being a classroom teacher that those outside of the field really can't relate to. There's a lot of nuance to the job that those on the outside wouldn't even know existed. But this is the law, and this is the way it's going to be for now. I kind of take the same approach when it comes to any legislation like this that is going to put more teachers in the schools. There's nothing as a teacher that you're going to be able to do about it right now. If you're against this idea, it's not something that's going to change overnight. So what we have an obligation to do as educators is what is best for the student. And in this circumstance, what is best for the student is to make sure that if you are assigned as a mentor to these veterans, that you be the absolute best mentor that you can possibly be. Everyone wins if these veterans become great teachers. Okay, the state wins, the school district wins, and ultimately, and most importantly, the students win. We are supposed to be in this for the sake of the kids. And it doesn't do us any good to be bitter about a law. I had to go through this or that to get my credentials, and they're not having to do the same thing. Life is not fair. We, as civilians, didn't go through the things that they went through as veterans. So, it's a two-way street. You make the best of whatever the situation is. And I think that we have a lot that we can learn from them, from their life experience. And they have a lot that they can learn from us, from our classroom experience. And it could ultimately end up being a really beneficial situation. I think it's just a matter of how much work you put into it to make it work. Another state that has implemented some key changes with the shortage of teachers is the state of Missouri. They are doing something that I am a very strong supporter of. And I've spoken on previous episodes about testing anxiety and, my distaste of this model of a standardized test being kind of like the ultimate determinant of our success. And just as our students are graded based on how well they did on one singular test, teachers are the same way. You go through an entire program, whether it be getting your education degree or, being alternatively certified, whatever your state's options are. And you do all of the coursework that's required. You do all of the projects that are required. And ultimately, none of it really matters if you can't pass the certification exams, right? Now you get, like temporary, probationary time or whatever for retakes and things like that. But ultimately, if you can't pass the test, you're not going to be a teacher. And so what Missouri has done is that they have granted teaching certificates to test takers who score within one standard error of measurement, meaning that they missed the qualifying score by, a few questions or less. The education department of the state of Missouri has said that about 550 teachers will benefit from this policy change. 80% of them, so 80% of that 550 are directly feeding into the highest need areas of the state, whether it be content areas or potentially, regions that are hit the hardest by teacher shortages. So, what they're doing is they're not cheapening the test. They're not saying that it's not necessary or drastically lowering the standard to get in. They're saying, if you had to get 38 questions right to pass the test, we're going to give you some wiggle room and say it's 35 now. You're still having to ultimately show that you have a grasp and total knowledge of the subject area. But they are giving some grace. And they're saying that it carries a minimal risk. It's not really something that should hurt education in general. I don't think that teachers coming in that made 2 correct answers fewer than their neighbor teacher are going to be significantly worse teachers because of how they performed on a test. I'll tell you from personal experience, I scored substantially better on my English language arts test than I did on my social studies composite certification test. And I studied history in college. Like, I was a social studies guy. So if you asked me to teach a subject, social studies is my wheelhouse. It is what I know. But because of the structure of the test and how all-encompassing the social studies composite test was, I had an easier time with the ELA test. It doesn't mean I'm a better ELA teacher. And I think that's what this approach from Missouri is looking at. Is like, are we really doing a disservice to the students by opening it up just a little bit? No, we're actually going to benefit more students. Because what's better, a teacher who missed by, a tiny percentage point, or a teacher with no qualifications whatsoever? You'd rather the students have a teacher, somebody who has learned the ropes, somebody who is that close, right? Than a constant revolving door of substitute teachers or an overcrowded classroom because they're understaffed. It's better for the students in the long run. Similarly, the state of Alabama had considered a very similar approach with opening it up by one standard error of measurement. It would have accounted for about 1,200 teachers between fall of 2019 and the fall of 2021. So that was on the table to potentially be the new model, or at least temporarily the new standard. What they did instead, as kind of a middle ground, is in July of this year, so just a few months ago, they actually voted to lower the passing standard temporarily for those students who had higher GPAs. Okay, so it was an offset, much like a college acceptance used to be, and I'm not sure exactly how it is now because I know that the SAT and ACT are no longer necessarily the standard measurements for things, but it used to be kind of a calculated give and take of your high school GPA and your state or your test entrance scores. This is very similar to that. So maybe you scored a little lower on the certification test, but your overall program or college GPA was higher. And they also are implementing a waiver system for the highest need areas. So again, much like Missouri, they're really focusing in on what are those areas of need? What are those content areas? A lot of states, it's, especially middle and high school math, special ed, science, chemistry and physics, especially those higher level science courses. And what they'll do with those high need areas is actually grant temporary certification for those with lower scores, and then require them within a predetermined amount of time to still pass the test. So They're not letting them off the hook for their lower score. They're saying, we need you in the classroom right now. You've done all of these other things to become a teacher. You have this amount of time. During that time, you can teach, but you have this amount of time, and you have to pass the test during that amount of time. The state of Arizona has gone a little different route with it. I briefly touched on it when I was talking about Florida. And again, it was another one that was great, clickbait. It was one that was, all the headlines were, Arizona allowing teachers to teach without a bachelor's degree. And it's like, okay, but what's the rest of the story, right? Because it's never as simple as like, hey, you graduated high school yesterday. Come on, you're a certified teacher now. It's not like that, right? So Arizona had about a 26% vacancy rate, which if you go back to my episode where I talked about the teacher exodus, I was saying we had hovered for the last couple of decades right around 10%. We had gotten nationwide to about 13%. And Arizona's teacher shortage had gotten them to double that effectively. Essentially, a fourth of classrooms were without a teacher. 2,000 classrooms without an official teacher of record. Okay, so some serious issues there. And I won't necessarily go into some of the underlying causes for that. Arizona does have the lowest teacher salaries in the country. They have a budget surplus. The Department of Education reports a budget surplus, and yet still the lowest salaries in the country. So, this is fixing the result of a greater issue, right? It's basically putting a Band-Aid on an open wound. But what it's allowing to happen is that they won't have to have a college degree before they get hired. They only have to be enrolled in college in order to begin teaching. So similarly to what we talked about with Florida, it's almost serving as like a grow your own model. Like we'll get you in the door. You're enrolled in a college program already. Okay, so we know that you have a plan to get to the finish line. In a way, it's very concerning because, you could potentially be very early on in your college program. And as anyone who ever went to college will tell you, not everybody that starts college will finish college. Not everyone's cut out for it. It's not for everyone. It's not and it doesn't need to be for everyone. There are people who go on and become very successful in a variety of different fields and certainly make more money than I ever made as a teacher and have more, flexibility than I ever had. And they do not have a 4-year degree. So, I am not going to sit here and say that college is a necessary component of success, because it's not. It's not going to be for everyone. So in that regard, the Arizona decision worries me a bit. On the flip side of that, if you can get them into the schools and you can provide them with mentoring and support and guidance as they work their way through their program, I do think that you can increase the likelihood of their success. It is a difficult road to become a teacher. And you will second guess yourself at times. But if you are able to develop a support system in the field before you ever get, to the finish line, I do genuinely think it will go a long way. On the flip side of that, it will also weed out people who just aren't built for the profession. I taught at a school, we called it a PDS campus. It was a professional development school. We worked with a local university, and we hosted their student teachers as they were doing their internship hours and their student teaching. And I would often, talk with. They would come through their freshman year, and then I believe again their junior year, and I would talk to them as freshmen, and I would be, very open with them and say, I want you to pay attention to what you see in the classroom. I want you to pay attention to the way students interact with their teachers, teachers interact with administrators, and vice versa. I want you to really get a feel of what a school campus looks like and how it operates. And if you can come in here every day and still feel passionate about, what it is that you're setting out to do here, then you're in the right place. There is no substitute for immersing yourself in a classroom environment. I don't care how many hours of, teaching theory and practice you get in a college classroom. It will not fully prepare you until you are boots on the ground, actively immersed in teaching. And so, just as much as getting these Arizona college students in early and reinforcing their passion for teaching, I think it will equally push out people that would otherwise have come into the profession and left within 2 or 3 years anyway. So in that regard, it's not necessarily, it's kind of a net zero sort of situation where you can lose them now or you can lose them in 5 years, but people who aren't going to cut it, they're not going to cut it. And at least if you can have a hands-on approach to working them through the program and letting them understand how your district operates, then maybe you can find some benefit there. So again, just like with Florida, I think that there are some serious concerns with this model. I don't know about any of you guys, but I know that when I was 19 and, I had my group of friends in college, not all of them ended up doing what they started off, planning to do their freshman year. Matter of fact, a lot of us didn't. I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was in 4th grade, but I'm also a weirdo. A lot of people change their mind throughout the course of a program. And I do worry that the earlier we are getting these people into a classroom, the more turnover you might see early on. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Arizona kind of tighten this up a little bit and maybe take on some of that approach that Florida did with a minimum of 60 hours or something along those lines, a little higher level of commitment to teaching in general. Now, that's not necessarily a guaranteed fix because not everyone that teaches is an education major, right? So they might not change their major because they're passionate about whatever their subject is, but it may not be education. I wasn't an education major. Even though I knew I wanted to teach, I majored in my particular subject area and then got a certification to teach. So there are, little caveats to these laws that are being passed that I'm anxious to see what exactly will come of them. But they do give me pause. And then we've got New Jersey. New Jersey, I thought, was interesting because New Jersey kind of took a multi-tiered approach to this trying to fix the teacher shortage issue. They created a pilot program, kind of launching it and seeing kind of how it plays out. It's a 5-year pilot program where prospective teachers can get limited certification, even if they don't meet the minimum GPA requirement or earn the minimum passing score on a state licensing test of their subject matter knowledge. So if they miss out on one or the other, they don't have the GPA or they weren't quite able to pass the content area, they can get various levels of limited certification. And so what that looks like is what they're referring to as CEs and CEAs. They're able to get limited CEs or limited CEAs. CE is credit of eligibility, and a CEA is a certificate of eligibility with advanced standing. Now, I'll dive into each of those examples here in a second, but first and foremost, in order to hire people with these particular limitations or restrictions on their certification, a district must first have to enroll in the state program. So before they do anything, they have to be a member of this program. Otherwise, they can't hire these teachers anyway. So what the limited CE, that's going to be, they have a bachelor's degree. They have the content coursework. So they've done enough hours of the content specifically. This is the existing certifications. This is what it has taken for anyone to get a certification. They have the content coursework. They have a bachelor's degree. They've gone through an educator preparation program. They have a 3.0 or better GPA. They pass a content knowledge assessment. They pass a basic skills assessment, and they pass a performance assessment. So what this pilot program is doing is it's created those two levels, the limited CE. So it's a limited version of that certification. And then the limited CEAS, which is a more limited version. So for the limited CE, they have to have all but one of this list. So they have to have the GPA component, the content coursework, the basic skills assessment, or the content knowledge assessment. They can have 3 out of those 4 and still receive a limited CE. So much like what we saw with Missouri and Alabama, they're not cheapening the certification, and it's not a permanent solution. They are saying, we are able to give some grace, provide you with an avenue to gain certification because it helps us out and fills these roles, but you've also proven enough of your mastery of the content that we feel confident with you going into a classroom. For the limited CEAS, they have to have the GPA or the content knowledge assessment. So they have to have met all of those other standards and then either have the GPA or the content knowledge assessment. So again, they're taking it a step further and saying, okay, you couldn't meet all of this stuff up here. Can you at least meet one of these two things? And if you can, coupled with, having a bachelor's degree, coupled with having the programmatic completion that was required, do you either have the GPA or a passing content knowledge assessment score? In which case we'll give you the limited CEAS. Now, again, they can only get hired by districts who have signed up for this program. Additionally, the districts have to fall into certain categories. So they have to either have a demographic disparity between the district's students, population, and teachers, a shortage of bilingual education teachers, or a critical need to fill teacher vacancies, or a hardship caused by teacher vacancies. So not every school will qualify. You have to meet these standards in the state of New Jersey to even gain the opportunity to hire teachers that are on these limited certifications. So again, all they're doing is slightly expanding the talent pool in hopes to kind of soften the blow of the teacher shortage. And then there's further requirements on the district. So even if a district meets all of those eligibility requirements and they are approved under this program, they can't just go and fill all of their vacancies with limited credential teachers. They can't have any more than 10% of their total teacher population under this pilot program. So if you have, 50 teaching positions and you have 10 available positions, you couldn't hire any more than 5 of those through this program because anything more than that would be more than 10% of your teacher population. So, again, it's not a fix-all. It's not going to solve all of the problems of the district. All it's going to do is provide a little more opportunity for a larger pool of talent to be able to bring in. The school district must also offer mentoring to these teachers. So again, just like with all these other programs, it is a huge, huge benefit to the new teacher, whether they were a 4.0 student and passed all their credentials and have gone through a traditional route to become a teacher, or they're coming in through one of these programs. Mentoring is huge because you don't know what you don't know. There is no substitute for teaching experience. And I think offering them a high-level mentor who will show them the ropes and be supportive and be patient and really try to do what is best for the students by creating a unified, well-prepared batch of teachers on their campus, I think is incredibly important. You don't have to come from the same background. You don't have to have the same path to becoming a teacher. But ultimately, when you're hired on the same campus to teach the same group of kids, it is in the best interest of the district and the kids and everyone employed by the district to make sure that everyone is at their best. And mentoring is a huge part of this. The districts will also be required to regularly evaluate these new teachers. So if it's not working, it's not working. That's how these pilot programs work. They're not just saying, hey, we put this plan together and whatever happens, happens. No, they have to evaluate the process, because if the data is showing that these teachers are not being successful, then it's back to the drawing board. And then they will ultimately be responsible for recommending these limited CE and CEAS teachers for provisional certificates, based on their performance. So these aren't all of the states by any stretch that have implemented new programs or new legislation to try to, expand their teacher base. I just thought these were, some of the more interesting approaches that we had seen. And I'm sure, given the volume of teacher vacancies going into this school year, this will be a trend that we probably see a lot more in the coming years, at least until we can kind of, start to flatten the curve on these teacher shortage numbers. There's got to be a fix. I think it's going to require more than just, adjusting the expectations of certification exams. There really needs to be a holistic view at, the expectations of teachers, the compensation of teachers, the support that is provided for both new educators and veteran educators. There are a lot of issues to fix, and that's kind of what this whole podcast is about. But I do feel like there are components that we discussed here today that will go a long way toward kind of damming the flood until much larger issues can be resolved. Right now, we're seeing just a complete kind of tailspin from a lot of things that have been left unattended, ignored. You finally have gotten to a point over the last few years where teachers who were in a position to make a change have decided to do so. And as I mentioned in the Exodus episode, we're having trouble getting new teachers into the classroom. And so, minor adjustments like this that will help get new teachers into the classroom are great. They need to also be supplemented by wholesale changes in, at the state and federal level from the education agencies, or this will just be a temporary fix. It'd be like putting a piece of duct tape on a sinking ship. We've got a lot of work to do, and I have faith that we can get it done. And I think that as educators, if we band together and continue to shed light on some of these issues and really put the pressure on our leaders at the state and federal level to make sure that we're heard. There are far too many teachers and parents of public school children and, support staff and, grandparents, aunts and uncles, friends of, families in public school, for there not to be more outrage than there is over the kind of direction that it's gone in. And so I think, continuing to be vocal about these issues and being diligent in our approach to resolving these issues is going to be the key to long-term solutions rather than some of these temporary fixes. But again, I'm not against the temporary fixes. You can't allow the fire to spread and do nothing about it. You have to do things in the interim while working on the long term. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for listening today. If you have any insight, if you're a teacher in one of these states, or you have friends and family that are in these states, and you can provide a little more insight into kind of the mindset of teachers that are, working in these areas. What is the consensus view on these changes in your state? Are teachers, supportive and optimistic on some of these things because they know that an influx of, additional support is going to take a little bit of work off their plate? Or are they having major concerns? I'd love to hear about these things. Be sure to, comment on any of the social media channels. Be sure to email me at talkoftheclasspodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear your feedback and bring it to the attention of the listeners in future episodes. I'd also love to hear, just general feedback on this topic. Maybe your state is doing something different that you feel like is completely out of left field. Or you feel like it's a great response to this, teacher shortage crisis that's happening right now. I welcome all responses because ultimately, if it benefits a small group, it has an opportunity to benefit a much larger audience. And if we truly are here as a teaching community together, then we want all the information out there. We want to be able to spread things that are working, things that are not working, really try to get those opinions out there. Again, thank you very much for your support. Make sure you follow the social media pages. Again, that's at Talk of the Class Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Check us out on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe to the videos there. And I will see you again next week. Thank you, everyone.